Welcome back to the Chosen Journey with Big Money Grip, Steve Karsay. Steve, my buddy, how you doing?
Good, Jonathan. How are you?
I'm really well, thanks. We got the set going. We got the Brewers jersey in the back, as always. You are wearing a different hat today, not the usual team hat. So what's going on there?
Just something a little bit different. Throw it in there. You can see it. It says the black sheep. Always seem like I can be the black sheep of the family. So it was one of those hats that I saw on the shelf and ended up getting.
It's funny, I've always seen myself as a black sheep, in the family, black sheep among teammates or coworkers. But sometimes that means that you're maybe original or maybe a little different than the norm, and that's not so bad, in life.
We like to see it like that, right? I mean, maybe be a little bit different, think outside the box, and work outside your comfort zone. And that's what life is all about.
I tell often when I'm mentoring, let's say a young lawyer at my firm, and I said, you have a choice in life. You could be a wolf or you could be a sheep, and this is your choice. But being a black sheep is a different kind of sheep. It's funny how that logic works out. Now,
Okay.
I'm wearing one of my flexing shirts today. You have a very special shirt on. I'm very
I
excited to
do.
show it. Let's see that bad
Yeah.
boy,
So
please.
mine ends up being Air Uecker for Bob Uecker. When I was with the Brewers, uh, we would come up with different shirts and they would hand them out and do that. And there was a special something going on with Bob Uecker. It was one of his birthdays or something. We always do something fun because he travels with the team and he's just a staple in Milwaukee and what he does. So it was a lot of fun being around him for 3 years, hearing his stories, and it was just fun getting a shirt and having him on the front.
So this did not go out to the public. This was like an internal team thing for Bob.
That's right. This is an internal team shirt that wasn't sold anywhere else or put out publicly anywhere else. It was just an internal team T-shirt that was given to the players and staff.
Well, I gotta tell you, I do pray to the baseball gods daily that Bob Uecker will make his way onto the chosen journey. I can imagine the three of us, like we and I were talking about it off air. Bob comes on, you and I might as well take away our mics and our headphones because he's just gonna be talking for the next hour straight.
He's such a treat. I mean, it's to hear his stories and to hear different things that have gone on in his life and what he has gone through and where he's gotten to today is remarkable. And it's just a lot of fun being around him.
I mean, him and Vince Scully, if you really think about it, like they're just cut from the same cloth, so to speak. They're very different, but they kind of get to the same place. But I don't know if we're gonna see any broadcasters like that again. They were just so special from a different era, broadcasting for 130 years for their teams. And Bob's so synonymous with the Brewers. Just a talent and a great man. A lot of fans that are outside of Milwaukee would know him from the Major League Baseball franchise, the Major League series, the baseball movies, just a bit outside. He's those lines, and he was just Harry Doyle, I think was his name.
Yeah. It's great.
How often did he bring up those movies out of curiosity? Ever?
On occasion. I mean, obviously he does a show with counsel and they talk in the office, and then he'll come in the coach's office, and that's where we get to hear his stories and talk to him. He's such a lighthearted guy, and he loves to tell stories, and it's just fun listening to him.
Well, the reason I also want to meet Bob Uecker is I really want to make amends for the one time I met him. I'll tell the story now, and you and I, we were pretty sure we talked about this on our own in a previous lifetime, but I will say it again because it's my fun baseball story. I certainly talked about it on my podcast, The Chosen Life, and talked about baseball memorabilia and collecting and meeting players. And I remember I was a big Dave Parker fan. I loved the Cobra. Cobra was awesome. I was just in Pittsburgh, the other week, and I picked up a Dave Parker shirt. So I decided I'm going to camp out. If the Brewers are playing the Blue Jays, I'm in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and I don't know, 12 at this point, 13. I'm going to do whatever it takes day and night. I'm going to meet Dave Parker. So I'm waiting, camping out by the team bus, hoping that Dave Parker is going to take the bus this time. I did not see him taking a cab. And it's day number one. I meet Teddy Higuera, name for the past. Haven't said that in about 25 years. So it was a pretty stacked team at the time. Robin Yount was on there, BJ Surhoff, Paul Molitor. So it was a really nice team the Brewers had at that point. A guy comes sprinting through right by me, and like a flash, and I think it's one of the players sitting on the bus. It is Bob Uecker. He bolted from that hotel. I barely even saw him, but I see him sitting there. So I look and I'm like, oh, I think that's Bob Uecker. Bob Uecker gives me the finger. And I'm thinking, what did I do to Bob Uecker? I've never met the man, and he's doing it repeatedly. And I'm like, oh boy, okay, sorry, whatever. And the team bus eventually takes off. Fine. Game went well that day. Dave Parker had 2 home runs for the Brewers, so he was in a very, very good mood as I met him later on in the hotel. As I'm waiting for Dave Parker to come in and celebrate his home run day, I get a tap on my shoulder. This is late night at the Sheraton Hotel in Toronto, and I look back, and who is it? It is Bob Uecker. And he says, hello, son. I said, hello, Mr. Uecker. It's a pleasure to meet you. He says, I'm really sorry. I think you thought that was directed to you. There were these kids that were harassing me in the lobby of the hotel. They wouldn't leave me alone for half an hour. I wanted to just be left alone at this point. So that's why I bolted onto the bus. Please, nothing personal. I'm happy to sign an autograph for you, whatever you like. I only have 1 ball left, and I'm waiting for Dave Parker. So I'm like, oh, is it Bob Uecker? Dave Parker, what do I do? And I said, so I just told him, I actually don't have anything for you to sign, Mr. Uecker, but I wanted to let you know that I was a really big fan of yours on Mr. Belvedere. It's one of my favorite shows, and I thought you were awesome on Mr. Belvedere. He looks at me and gives me this crooked look as if he doesn't believe me, and he goes, thanks. And he walks off. And to this day, I felt very badly about that interaction because the truth of the matter is I was a Mr. Belvedere fan. I watched it religiously. I've seen all the episodes. I'm still convinced that the oldest son of Mr. Belvedere was actually Marilyn Manson. They look the exact same, but apparently that's an urban legend, and that's not the same guy. But Mr. Belvedere and Bob Uecker was the father on the show. And so he had a TV show. He was famous in the Major League Series. He's a broadcaster. The man did everything. And man, I can only imagine the stories he has. So later in life, it'd be nice to meet him. I don't think he'll remember this interaction, but it'll be interesting to see what he says.
If I know Bob, he'll remember it. I'm telling you, you laugh, but I'm telling you, if I know Bob, he will remember this story.
I got this crazy, crazy feeling that in all those years, I'm probably the only person that brought up Mr. Belvedere to him. But it's still in reruns, so I'm sure he's getting the royalty checks for that. So
absolutely,
we wish him well on that. And segueing to today's chapter, as you know, it's funny, I don't always have it planned in my mind, but organically they find their way. Guaranteed that Bob Uecker has found his way to several MLB All-Star games in some capacity or another. So today we're talking to our MLB All-Star correspondent, Steve Karsay, who attended at Dodger Stadium and got to enjoy the festivities. Steve, how was the 2022 All-Star game?
It was really good. It was fun to go and watch it from a different perspective. My son and I went. We were fortunate enough to get some seats behind home plate through a friend of mine, and we were able to sit there and watch the game and take it all in from a different perspective and see all the great players, see the bombs that Stanton and Buxton hit off of Gosselin, and see how far they went. The festivities, the planes flying overhead. It was the first All-Star game I've ever been to as either a coach, player, or in person as a big leaguer, or as a big league All-Star game goes, not a minor league All-Star game. So it was enjoyable. It was great bonding time. We loved it. He enjoyed it. Something that I think that'll last a lifetime.
So from the time you are born till today, in your whole existence, as far as ever attending a live All-Star game and MLB one, this was your first?
It was my first.
Even as a kid, you never attended one as a fan? Never been to one? You probably saw them on TV, obviously, but
watched them all the time. Yeah, I watched them all the time on TV, and been around a lot of All-Stars, but never actually went to one or pitched in one or watched one in person until this last one at Dodger Stadium.
So now, when I'm speaking with you on this, I'm thinking in my mind, we got Joe Fan that's sitting on their couch right now. They're watching us on the big screen. I'm channeling them right now, and Joe Fan is saying to me, "You got to ask a couple questions, please. I'm sorry they're stupid, but we got to know this stuff." So, Steve, sorry, but I'm channeling the fans right now that I know I'd want to know. So I'm pretty sure they'd want to know. First things first, going as an ex-player and attending Dodger Stadium in the festivities. Is there ever that thought in your mind with your kid as far as, am I going to get recognized? You know, do I want to be bothered? I'm with my family right now. Ever was that an issue at all in Dodger Stadium?
It's not. I don't think about it like that. If I'm ever going to go to a public facility or a public place to watch a game, whether it's hockey, basketball, football, baseball, I just kind of go, and if somebody recognizes me, they recognize me. I'm willing to stop and chat with them and talk with them. But it's not something that weighs on my mind. I was going there just to enjoy the game, spend time with my son, and have him enjoy his first All-Star game in person.
So the only player, and I mentioned this to you in passing as well. It's funny how all these stories got interrelated. But the only player I could tell you that, and I've seen a lot of players on the street, the only one I've ever seen wearing his own stuff when he doesn't need to was Omar Vizquel. I remember Omar Vizquel actually wearing a shirt with a picture of him on a T-shirt. On the back, Omar Vizquel, number 13. So you can't miss this guy walking down the street. I've never seen somebody actually want to wear their own paraphernalia. So I'm pretty sure when you're sitting at Dodger Stadium, you're not wearing a Karsay jersey at that point.
I am not wearing a Karsay jersey at that point. Omar is very eclectic and very, outgoing. So he loves that kind of stuff. But I like to stay a little bit more subdued and just kind of mingle amongst the crowd and watch the game.
And when I tell you some of these stories, like I tell you the Bob Uecker story, now Omar Vizquel, you've either played with them or coached with them. So Omar Vizquel, you do know him. This does not surprise you in the slightest.
Not in the slightest. He's always been like that. He's a very colorful guy. He loves painting, obviously, and he loves the bright colors. So lime green, yellow, orange is exactly what he would be flaunting if he was out on the street.
Me and Omar are kindred spirits. I think that way. I think I understand him where he's coming from with that. And I got to tell you, if there's one guy, and I mentioned this before, as far as because the Hall of Fame just came through. And so when we're taping this, we just had the induction ceremony, Big Papi, he's all excited. Mm-hmm. There's one guy I got to tell you, from that era, I don't understand. And, you don't have to answer this, but Omar Vizquel, I always say if Ozzie Smith is in the Hall of Fame, Omar Vizquel should be in the Hall of Fame, period, based on his wizardry with the glove. The guy was incredible. Like he was as a Hoover as you get, automatic outs every time he was there. I remember that he got traded for Felix Fermin back in the day.
Yeah.
And man, he developed. He was an average to above average hitter. He didn't embarrass himself out there. I think he was pretty steady with the bat at the bottom of the lineup, but he was such a sure thing. He saved so many runs for his teams. Loved watching him in the field.
Yeah, a very special player. Obviously got to enjoy his talents when I was on the mound and he was playing behind me at shortstop. Him and Robbie Alomar up the middle. Couldn't ask for a better duo when you're pitching on the mound. They'll gobble up anything and turn double plays like nobody's business. But as far as Omar goes, I agree. I mean, the comps are very similar to the Ozzie Smiths and the Gold Gloves, and maybe he's not at 3,000 hits and he played for over 20 years, Omar, but the numbers he put up, you just can't deny. And I'm sure that'll get looked at as, as writers look into the future more on, whether he should be or shouldn't be at some point to be in the Hall of Fame.
You never know, Steve. One of us may have that vote down the road at some point, depending on how this goes, and maybe we'll be considering him. I don't have the research in front of me, but I will be curious to check on it into the future of how many All-Star games Omar went to. Part of the issue is, as you know, for a lot of players, when you play in a certain era, you could be a top catcher, a top shortstop. But if you happen to get stuck behind, let's say, a Derek Jeter, good luck in ever getting voted in. And it only can carry so many shortstops. There's a whole thing behind it as far as how many players go, teams getting represented, positions getting represented. There's a lot of guys when you go and look through their list and you're saying, wow, I thought that they for sure were going to be part of more All-Star games, including our present company here, which I told you off the air, I looked and researched, and I'm like, how did Steve never come to an All-Star game? And that was stupid question number two. Steve, tell us, man. Like, I'm in utter shock, man. You had the stats there. You thought 1 year, I would think for sure 1 year would hit. So, what do you, in your estimation, happened there?
Well, you think about it, in the areas that I played, there weren't very many middle relievers who went to All-Star games, to be quite honest with you. It started becoming a thing in, the late 1990s and the early 2000s, where if you were putting up a super solid year, that you might get consideration to go. And it was just one of those things. They always took starters and they always took relievers. If there was no replacements in this year's All-Star game, that's how it would have been too. Devin Williams and Mantiply kind of were the two that were added later, who were middle relievers that got the pitch in the game. But other than that, it was just whether you racked up the saves or you were elite starter, because there's only 12 players that can go. It's a very limited company, right? So at the end of the day, I think the era that I played had a little bit to do with that, but also the year, and we discussed this a little bit, the year that I played, that I was having a tremendous season in 2001. I was with the Cleveland Indians, had a mid ones ERA going into June, coming up on the All-Star break or the All-Star game. Probably a week away from maybe getting consideration to pitch in it. And then, a week before that, I get traded, somewhere around June 26th, I believe it was. I was in Kansas City and got traded to the Atlanta Braves. They didn't commingle stats at the time. It was American League stats, National League stats. And at the end of the day, none of my stats transferred over to the Atlanta Braves. I started from 0-0-0 and didn't have what I, accumulated with the Cleveland Indians. So I was in the National League, and I don't think I could have played for the American League at that particular time. So it just wasn't in the cards. And, it's just one of those things that, it would have been, great to say that I had gone to an All-Star game or pitched in an All-Star game. But at the end of the day, it didn't happen. And I can live with that. That's just, the way the world works, and it's part of the journey.
Listen, if there's one person I can tell you as a professional that we can talk to about it, it is you, which I appreciate very much your honesty and be able to open up, because I can tell you in sports with competitiveness, a lot of people do not want to discuss as far as whether All-Star game, no All-Star game, MVPs, Cy Youngs, World Series. It becomes very touchy subjects that, I mean, look at Nick Castellanos the other day, as far as the reporter coming to him and saying, Nick, did you by chance hear those boos out there? And he's like, no, I lost my hearing. And then they explode on it. Now that's in the heat of the moment, obviously, but not everybody is. Some people will take it, with humor. Some will not. I could tell you, for all the time for our friendship, very humble. You're happy with your place. Very much like Charles Barkley. Come to Charles Barkley. Hey Charles, you don't have a ring. So what? I'm Charles Barkley. Like life that doesn't define somebody, I think, through those items. There's a lot of factors that go into it, certainly, and it works out for some people, some not. But look, we've gone through the numbers. Even for somebody just to pitch 1 day in the major leagues, 1 day, you have a better chance of winning the lottery. Like, it's so little, and you got to have a major league career with it. So I presume when you reflect on it, there's no hard feelings that way. It's just that's how it rolls.
Listen, did I want to go? Was that, an ambition of mine? Of course it was. But again, it just wasn't in the cards. And, it is what it is. I mean, I use that saying, probably more than I should, but it is what it is. You either make it or you don't. And then if you don't make it, you move on and you live with it. And the same thing with the ring, in Charles Barkley's case and anybody's case who's played in the big leagues for a very long time. There are a lot of people who played 10, 12, 15, 18 years who've never had a ring. There are a lot of factors that determine whether you win a ring. The team you're on, how good that team is, how lucky that team is, what kind of a break, how you're playing when you go into October. There's so many variables that go into winning a World Series. It's not just one person. It's, the team and the organization who kind of accumulates that. And everything has to go right for you to win a World Series. I mean, look at the Dodgers, right? In '88, they won the World Series. And how many unbelievable teams have they had from '88 to 2000 before they won the World Series in that shortened season. So just because you have the highest payroll, or just because you have the best players, always doesn't mean you're going to win a World Series. You still have to have, a little luck on your side, and a few bounces go your way.
And another great segue to future promotion, where I tell people, make sure you hit the subscribe button, send your questions to Steve on this episode, or any questions in general you have for Steve on baseball. But when you mention those 88 Dodgers, I'll tell people a little sneak preview. Stay tuned. We dug up a future guest to be coming on. Very honored to have Fred Claire, the GM of the Dodgers back in 88 and a lifelong Dodgers executive, will be joining us on a future episode. And Steve, by all means, be happy, talking about that Dodgers team, questions on the Dodgers in general. I can imagine the stories he's going to have.
Yeah. When you're in that position, like Fred is, I think you see a lot of things, you hear a lot of things that transpire, things that don't transpire, whether it's a trade or not a trade, of different things of how trades work and what needs to fall in place for that. He did it for a long time. And like I said, I just think that the knowledge that he'll be able to put out there, that he's comfortable with, and how things are run in the front office will give a lot of people of insight of how baseball works as a business.
The one item I probably will not be bringing up with him, and I'm just going to glance upon this, but I got to tell you, as a baseball fan in general, I grew up loving the San Francisco Giants, was not a big Dodgers fan, but still appreciated and respected the history of the Dodgers. When Mike Piazza was traded from the Dodgers, it's like I felt my heart getting ripped out of my body. It seemed so weird not seeing him in Dodger blue, especially knowing the fact that he was Tommy Lasorda's godson, and he essentially was a favor to be drafted in the 300th round or whenever he was picked.
Yeah.
And what a story he was, and near the end of Fred's time there. And we probably won't get into that with him there, but it's funny how, there's in baseball, like any other sport, but especially baseball, there's always a story, there's always a story behind the story behind the story.
Yeah, it's really, really crazy how things work. And one day we'll get into, my trade in 93, where I was supposed to go to the Seattle Mariners with Mike Timlin at the time for Randy Johnson, and it just didn't transpire. So they had to shift and go to the A's and get Ricky Henderson instead of Randy Johnson. So we'll dig deeper into that. We'll give a little insight into what people may think about that, and kind of let them chew on that a little bit.
I did not know that. Where did nobody tell me this? The whole course of history, it's funny, they always say like life is a domino effect, and you change one of the dominoes, the whole thing spirals for everybody else. Imagine your life, Randy's life, Ricky's life, everybody's life. We will definitely get into this. You've now planted the seed.
Well, that's good. I mean, we will. I mean, it's like I said, it's really crazy. I didn't know this story until years later. I didn't know at the time. I knew I got traded in 93 to the A's for Ricky Henderson, got to the big leagues, obviously, a couple weeks later, after a few starts in the minors at Oakland's AA system. But yeah, until I've talked to a few people within the business, and these stories have come up, I had no idea.
And look, at the time, I guess that, from the perspective, if you have to pick one versus the other, they were already so loaded on offense. They had Whamco. They did not need Henderson at this point, the Jays. But knowing Ricky did not do much in Toronto that year, but they still won, having him there. But I think if they could have gone hindsight, they would have taken Randy in a second. But we will get into that, certainly. So,
well, the reason it didn't go through, and I'll kind of just leave it at this, and then we can discuss it a little bit more. But the reason it didn't go through, there's a time difference between the East Coast and the West Coast, right?
Yes.
And at the time, I don't know, I'm sure it was Pat Gillick, but either Pat or Gord was trying to get hold of the GM of the Seattle Mariners at the particular time. Mm-hmm. And as the story goes, I heard he was on the golf course and didn't answer his phone, and that's why they had to pivot to the Oakland A's before the midnight deadline, Eastern time.
Stay tuned, folks, when we get to the trade deadline episode, which may very well come up next.